But when you get good at one thing, it becomes really hard to turn around and do something different. You have to be open to failure. But remember, the alternative is guaranteed failure. If you don't innovate, you're definitely gone. The genie's out of the bottle. These technologies are too powerful. In software, if you're not keeping those customers for subsequent years, you're going to go bankrupt.
Welcome to Inspired by Success. I'm Linda Vogt, and today we've got someone who's not only mastered the art of innovation, but has a talent for turning struggling companies into success stories. He's not just your typical CEO, he's a triple major from Dartmouth, a Harvard Business School grad, and has led major transformation in trucking, footwear, and software. Now, as CEO of Ideascale, he's helping companies like NASA spark their next big innovation. But his story goes way beyond the boardroom. Raised by his grandmother in a small city in India, he's climbed his way to the top using brains, grit, and a passion for data-driven decision-making. So let's dive in and pick the brain of this innovation mastermind, Nick Jain. Welcome to the show, Nick.
Thank you so much for having me, and thank you so much for the kind introduction as well.
So Nick, these days every company talks about innovation. What do you think most of them are getting wrong?
Sure. So if you think about any organization, right, it could be an oil company, it could be a pharmaceutical company. Once you grow to a certain size, you get really good at doing whatever you were built to do. And that could be to, drill for oil or to make a certain type of drug. But when you get good at one thing, it becomes really hard to turn around and do something different. So it's inherently like if you were the greatest weightlifter in the world, it's really hard to turn around and become a good runner as well. So that's a consistent theme across all large, complex organizations, whether you're a nonprofit, whether you're in government, whether you're in pharmaceuticals or finance. Once you become large and complex, it becomes hard to actually continue to innovate. And ultimately, if you don't innovate, any organization, you die, right? Like innovate or die is kind of a common maxim in organizational theory.
Like when you're talking about innovation, I can totally understand about the innovation part. As a huge company, there's sometimes a lot of bureaucracy and politics around the growth. I've seen that with big corporations as well. But what are your thoughts on the focus part of it, though? Because like you mentioned, the weightlifting, becoming the runner, it's not a company known for, like if you're a company known for one thing and then you try to do something totally different and you're not known for it, couldn't that also fail?
It absolutely could. And that's actually something we fundamentally teach all of our customers, and all large organizations are really coming to grapple with in the last 5 or 10 years, is you have to be open to failure. But remember, the alternative is guaranteed failure. So if you are, a pharmaceutical company and you have one drug and you don't come up with the next drug, when your patent runs out, you're done. So it's not a choice, right? If you don't innovate, you're definitely gone. It may take 5 years, may take 10 years, may take 20 years, but you're eventually gone or anachronistic and irrelevant. If you innovate, you have a certain chance of failure, but you also have to think about you have a chance of succeeding, and at least you're giving yourself a way out. And the good news is, it's not totally random. There are things that any organization can do or any individual can do that significantly increase the probability of success, number one, and number two, decrease the cost of failure. The failure does not have to be something incredibly embarrassing that causes your company to be bankrupt or you to look stupid in the markets. It can actually be done. You can fail gracefully as part of your company culture, or you can fail very poorly, or you can, be outcompeted by your peers because someone out there is innovating if you aren't.
Yeah, I know that a lot of tech companies used to encourage failing fast and just constantly, even Elon Musk, you got to fail as many times because if you're not failing, then you're not going to succeed and innovate. So as you mentioned, some companies dying, you've turned around businesses in different industry. What's something different that you found that always works no matter what kind of business you're in?
Sure. I think that there's two consistent themes that I've noticed in business. I actually worked in Wall Street for a while. Really unique I learned there. Number one is every business fundamentally has the same elements, right? It has a product or service, it has an HR, it has a finance function, it has an operations function, a marketing function. And each of those are skills that can cut across industries, right? It's at the end of the day, it sounds really crazy, but marketing oil is not that different from marketing burgers, from marketing complex technologies. The same skills are applied. That's number one, that you can actually, if you get good at those core elements of running a business, then you can actually run or many different types of business. The second that's really important that I found is one of my strengths and I'm really passionate about is understanding how the machine of a business works. So like, how does McDonald's make money? If you go work at McDonald's or you're an executive there, it's really important that you understand how does McDonald's make money? How does WeWork make money? How does Pfizer make money? How does a government organization fulfill its mission? Its mission may be non-monetary, but what is its mission and how is it engineered as an organization to achieve that? If you don't understand that, you may get lucky and the business may succeed. But if you do understand it, that how all the levers within a business work, then it's very easy to move the levers around in a way that drives success. So for example, there's a concept known as unit economics, which is what is the fundamental unit of your business that makes profit or creates value for your stakeholders? Could be, again, a nonprofit stakeholder. A lot of leaders in many companies haven't sat down and thought about what their unit economics are and quantified them. This is not a conceptual, qualitative discussion, but something you can actually analytically determine, understand, and then modify as needed.
So you're talking about in that particular unit, take it back into layman's term and simplify that for me, because you mentioned those core elements that you need to be successful in business, which is what? Marketing, the finance, the product. What else was there?
HR as well. It's important to, monitor your team and manage your people. So I'll give two examples, right? The set of unit economics specifically. So for McDonald's or any fast food restaurant, their unit is a meal. They have to think about how much does it cost to make the burger, for example, not just in terms of the materials, but the labor of selling it to you. Then they have to think about the real estate costs, their technology costs. So the cost of a burger is not just the meat and the bun and the lettuce and the tomato and the sauce, but also the labor that went into making that, the labor that went into marketing it. And then you have to take that and compare that to how much you're able to sell the burger for, as well as how many burgers you're able to sell. So that's really simple at a McDonald's level, but the same concept applies to a software company. So for a software company such as ours, you spend a lot of resources building the software. It's really expensive to build high quality software. You may have 100 engineers working for 5 years to build something that's actually worth selling. Okay, but a software company, a good software company, doesn't actually make money by selling software one time or through sales process. It's through the fact that when you sell the software once, your customers come back to you next year and next year and next year and next year. So unlike a burger, which you sell once, software becomes a recurring revenue stream. So I actually have to think about not selling my software today, but making it so good that customers come back to me in year 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Right? Think of Gmail, for example. I know Gmail is a free piece of software, but almost everybody comes back next year, next year, next year. When have you ever thought about leaving Gmail? Never. And so that's a really important concept, because a lot of people in software, for example, they're out there, they have great marketing programs, they have great sales programs, they sell the software, but their software is not good enough, or their renewal rates are not good enough. So they don't get year 2, year 3, 4, year 5. And no matter how much you sell in software, if you're not keeping those customers for the subsequent years, you're going to go bankrupt. And that's a common issue that why you've seen a lot of startups and mid-sized software companies struggle over the last 2 years, because they didn't understand the renewal part of how software companies operate their businesses. Or should operate.
I totally agree with that. Just like Facebook as well. It's sticky, because, even if you wanted to delete Facebook, if you've been on it for years, you've got all your memories or your photos on there. That's why I wouldn't delete it, even though I'm like, there's so many ads on it, but that's like a sticky software company that's doing phenomenal. So let's talk about AI, because AI is changing everything. How's it shaping up in your world of innovation? And should we all be worried about robots taking our job? Because I love AI.
So my answer to the second question is yes. Sorry, go ahead.
I can't wait till we have robots to help us.
My personal perspective, the short answer to your question is yes, we should all be worried about robots or AI taking our jobs. And that's a serious concern I have. But the corollary to that is it can actually dramatically improve productivity within organizations, as well as the quality of life for the human race overall. So let's go back to how AI has affected our organization. It's really affected us in 2 ways. Number one, internally in our operations, the way we run marketing, the way we run sales, the way we run software engineering, those have all been dramatically changed by AI. Our efficiency rates have increased. There's an employee, one of our SEO employees was joking with me last spring that after adopting ChatGPT and some of the similar technologies, he was doing the work of 8 people. Right? That's extraordinary. That's great for us because we were early adopters of this technology. And if one person's doing the job of 8, that's great. But, to the back half of your question, that means there's 7 other jobs that have either stopped existing or have morphed into something else. Okay. Number one, internally at Ideascale, we significantly leverage generative AI technologies for everything, the marketing and sales stuff that everyone does, but also in software engineering, also in business decision making. So I've actually do some financial decision making within ChatGPT because it can logic the stuff faster than I can if I use Excel. And I'm pretty good at Excel and it can still go faster than me. Number 2 is how it's actually affected our software. So almost every software company in the world has started saying we're adopting AI, right? Partially as a marketing term, but partially because the applications of these AI technologies are so broad. Amazon I don't know if you've been on Amazon reviews recently. Instead of you reading 10,000 reviews of whatever product you're looking to buy, they've used generative AI to summarize those 10,000 reviews. So you can just say like, this is a great product, but only lasts a year, right? Or the color's a little bit, which you would have normally had to read 25 reviews to figure out. So every software company is using generative AI. We're no exception. We use it in two ways. Number one, so far, we use it to help identify which types of innovations are similar within an organization so that 10 people aren't working on the same thing simultaneously and like doing double work, which is sometimes very different and difficult to identify because somebody may be doing the same thing in Japan as someone in China, as someone in Russia, as someone in the United States. If you're all working at the same company, you should all get together and, share your insights. Number two is one of the things we discovered about innovation and through our research at Ideascale is stage fright is a really common issue. People are afraid to share their ideas, not because they think their ideas are bad, but because they are afraid they're not good writers or good communicators and they'll sound stupid. Like sounding stupid is a major issue. So we've actually used AI to take people who are a little bit uncomfortable or have stage fright about sharing their ideas and helping and making them look like rock stars and great writers. Is we've incorporated in our technology really to address those two pain points, avoiding duplicative innovation, as well as encouraging or enabling people to communicate more eloquently than they would otherwise.
Yeah, I love it too, because as you mentioned, it can definitely help with the productivity. Now, you mentioned two things that grabbed my attention because I want to improve on the skills as well. You said you use AI for Excel as a small business owner. Can you elaborate on that? Because that, for
Sure.
me, I'm in the process of trying to find the proper finance person. I'm only a small business, but if I could leverage AI using my QuickBooks and all the data from my sales and whatnot to help me make informed budgeting decisions, that's what I'm after. I mean, it would save me time. Do you think that's a functionality that's something
Absolutely.
that you've done?
First of all, I spent most of my career in Wall Street, so I'm extraordinarily good at Excel, probably the top 0.1% in the world, right? So I can do almost anything in Excel that's possible. But rather than spending an hour building a spreadsheet or doing some complex analysis, why not have AI do it for me? And that's in a complex use case like ours, but this applies to a small business as well. I say AI can help kind of any business owner, whether you're running $1 billion corporation or one person small business. I think AI can do three really cool things in the finance department. Number one is you can do something called the persona pattern in generative AI. I don't know if you've heard of this. When you tell AI to act like something, so before you start giving it your prompts, you say, AI, act like a world-class marketer, or act like a world-class CFO, or act like a 5-year-old child, right? Give it those 5 very magical words, act like a whatever. And that is incredibly powerful because then it will act as your CFO. You don't have to go hire your CFO or your marketer, right? Because just the word CFO or marketer or engineer triggers so many memories within the AI that it's going to be as good as the 98th percentile of your CFOs you could find, right? I've actually tested this. The AI is better than 98% of people who are acting as CFOs in most companies. You can quantitatively prove it. It's kind of cool and terrifying again. Second is you can actually use it to do data analysis. So you can literally give AI a bunch of data and say, analyze this. And sometimes, depending on what type of data it is, you can literally say words as simple and ambiguous as analyze this, because you don't even know what you're looking for in the data or information, and it'll go figure out what it thinks is interesting. And that's really powerful when you don't have to think about the analyses, right? And that's true, again, whether you're a data scientist who's very good at manipulating data and knows exactly what he or she is looking for, or you're a small business owner who doesn't have a lot of data analysis skills. And then the third is you can have it act as a mentor. So let's imagine you're really good at whatever your business is, let's say selling shoes, and you're good at the marketing side of things, but you're not good at the finance side of things. You can tell it, hey, act as a finance mentor to me. Teach me how to do this. So rather than do the analysis for me, or rather than acting as my CFO, how about you act as my teacher? Teach me these skills that I don't know. And again, you can do that for finance or you can do that for marketing, because you may be the greatest product person, but you know nothing about marketing. Ask it to teach you. You'll learn something and you'll actually get better in the process of doing it.
Wow. Have you been able to get budgets? Just say acting as a CFO, does it give you actual budgets, do you think?
The way I would think about it is if you are good at using these generative AI technologies, they will be genuinely better than 98% of professionals that are working in the field in almost any field of intellectual endeavor. And that could be marketing, finance, software engineering. But by the way, you can go and look at the research. It's been very clearly proven that these AI tools, when properly used, are more capable than most human beings, including human beings who are professionals in their field. which on one hand is good because now for very cheap, for free or for $10 a month, you can get access to a world-class lawyer that would cost you $1 million a year, or a CFO that might cost $500,000 a year for basically nothing. On the other hand, it's terrifying for society. And, Elon Musk has noted this all the time, that we're quickly headed towards a world where AI replaces many human jobs, and we have to deal with that as a society. It may not be here today, but it's not too far in the future.
I know it's scary because it's happening, and he always talks about universal basic income as well, but I'll get your thoughts on that afterwards. I just wanted to add a little bit about the tools that we use, because I use Claude and I use ChatGPT as well. Which ones do you recommend? Which tools do you like using, or is it your own that you're creating?
There's four major tools out there: Claude, Gemini, ChatGPT, and then Llama, which is the open source one. Llama you can't run unless you have your own server. But the beautiful thing is it means you're not giving your data to Google or to Facebook or OpenAI. So we use a mix of all four of the ones that I just mentioned. Each has their own benefit. There's things that are Claude is a little bit better at versus Gemini. So I don't really specifically recommend one because I use them all in both my personal and my professional life. I've used one of them to help figure out what to get my wife for her birthday, for example. It was very good. The other important thing is these companies are continuously innovating at a breakneck speed, right? So even if Claude is best today, it might be Gemini tomorrow. It might be OpenAI a week from now. So anything that I told you about which one I recommend will be totally irrelevant in 2 weeks. So I'll say use them all, and they're all competing very quickly and evolving very rapidly. Literally every 2 weeks, they come up with a new smarter version of the model.
Wow, I had no idea. Yeah, because I've noticed that sometimes I use both Claude and ChatGPT, and then just to compare which one's better. And sometimes I notice one gets better than the other. But I've recently done this because I'm starting to do a little bit of coaching to help people start their own small vending machine business, because I've been successful in that. I have calls with people, triage calls, just to discover, to see if it's the right solution, if I'm the right coach for them. And then what I've recently done is just downloaded the transcript and then got AI to analyze it and pretend it is a world-class sales coach and give me all the objections and feedback and what I could do better. And it's like all these things I did not think of. And I'm like, this is amazing. I just love the tools and the functionality that it does. So it does help with businesses, especially with productivity and efficiency. And I really encourage it. But you mentioned like in the future, and because it's growing so rapidly, for the pessimist, AI can be scary because the jobs that it's going to take away in the economy. And that's another thing as well, because I'm concerned of that. I leverage it. I take all the opportunities and I leverage it. But then on the downside, the flip side is the economy. What are your thoughts on that, especially with universal basic income? I've spoken to another guest about it too, but I'm just curious to know what your thoughts are and how it will affect the economy in some way.
Sure. So I'll offer a strategic answer and then tactical answer. Strategically, technology has continued to evolve, since we invented the wheel and fire, right? And each new aspect of technology has created disruption in our civilizations, right? It's sometimes caused war, sometimes caused unemployment, right? Think of the Industrial Revolution, laid off unknowable amounts of people who were, knitting with their hands, and all of a sudden there's big industrial mills weaving out cloth. AI is a next step in that, but it's a profoundly different step because it's moving from something that the physical replacement of human beings to the potential intellectual replacement of human beings. So it is a different kind of technology than anything we faced before. The good news is it will create a tremendous amount of wealth for humanity. The bad news is that wealth is not necessarily going to be equally distributed, right? It may just, all of the value of these technologies may end up in the hands of a few individuals or a few companies. And that's really terrifying when you are replacing kind of the brains of human beings, which is really what differentiates us from the other 99 million species on this planet. The other thing that's really scary is we can't stop it, right? The genie's out of the bottle. These technologies are too powerful and we all want to use them, right? Imagine if I told people right now, you're not allowed to use ChatGPT or Gemini. People would revolt because it is such a cool technology, right? It's not just cool, it's such a useful technology. It would be akin to us saying, hey, you're not allowed to use vaccinations, right? People would revolt because it's such a fundamental way of our existence nowadays. So there's an inevitability of these technologies to continue to expand. And as they continue to expand, it will create tremendous disruptions, perhaps fundamentally different than any we faced before. As a consequence, I'm a realist, right? This is going to happen, whether it happens 1 year, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years from now, I don't know, but it is going to happen. It is inevitable. We have to be prepared for it as a society. And I think different societies will react to it different ways. Some will try and regulate it. Some will just try and prevent this technology from coming out. I think that's a fool's errand. Others will say like, okay, this is the reality of the world. We have now large portions of the population that are not going to be able to contribute meaningfully to society. And the only solution that I can ethically support as a human being is basically what Elon Musk has said. We need a universal basic income when large portions of the population can no longer meaningfully contribute to society.
It's a scary thing to think about. So, speaking about like cutting jobs, well, tech companies were cutting jobs before. I hear you're growing your team. So, what's the secret to keeping a company thriving while others are struggling?
Sure. So that's something we're very proud of. Over the last 2 or 3 years, a lot of technology companies, both big and small, have shut down or fired large amounts of people. We've grown our headcount by around 30-ish% over the last 2 years. I think it's two things. Number one, it goes back to, why I've been successful at running a business or multiple businesses. It's because I understand what makes a software company tick, right? I understand how a software company makes money, and it's important for you to make money and be profitable. Otherwise, you ultimately run out of money and you have to start firing people. Ideascale is, we're very proud of the fact that we're an extremely well-run organization internally. We know how to create value for our three major constituents, which is our customers, our employees, and our shareholders. And we do a good job at balancing all three of those. Number two is we are very careful about when we hire. So a lot of companies are like, oh, we just got a lot of venture capital money. Let's go on a hiring spree. And then like 2 years later, when the money runs out, they fire a bunch of people. And that's incredibly disruptive, both to your organization and in the individuals who are affected because they don't have jobs. That's tremendously emotionally taxing into both them and their families. We've been very careful through both under my predecessor, Rob, who founded this company, as well as under me, of when we hire when there's a real need and when we know we can create a meaningful opportunity for an individual and for the company. So we don't have to, a year or 2 years later, say, hey, we're out of money. Sorry, we got to fire people. We're very, very thoughtful about running our business and when we expand our business.
Do you have a majority of people working remotely as well? Or is
Yeah,
it
so almost
more
since day one, our
in-house?
company's been remote. So even before COVID, we've been around about 15 years. We have about 100 employees across 7 countries. We have 3 physical offices, one in Washington, D.C., 2.5 physical offices, I should say. One in Washington, D.C., one in Dhaka, Bangladesh, and half one in India right now. But employees in a bunch of other countries, I think Switzerland, Japan, South Africa, Brazil, Mexico. I may be missing something there.
Wow. And how do you keep the team's culture and creativity flowing, especially when everyone's working all across the world? Because I have a couple of remote workers as well, actually a few, and you have to really motivate and be sure to stay on top of it and have a trusting culture as well, because you're trusting your team to do the work for you from remote. But how do you do
Sure.
that? How do you keep your team's
There's
creativity flowing and the culture strong?
There's 3 elements. Number one, a good interview process, right? You have to be hiring people that you can trust that they're actually going to contribute. That's number one. Number two is constant communication. We're all on Slack constantly, right? So obviously respecting each other's time zones and boundaries and stuff. But hey, I'm the CEO of the company. If a junior person sitting in Mexico or Bangladesh, the United States wants to text or like message me, I will respond, and I expect that same reciprocity. So there's constant communication across departments, across seniority levels, across geographies. And that's really important to maintain like a one company culture. So you know that, hey, whether this person's based in California or Japan or Switzerland, we can all work together because we're truly one part of one team. And there's not classes of citizens or classes of people within the company. We're one company. The phrase I use, we're all paid out of the same bank account. We sink or swim together. And then the third is just good governance, right? So while there's a tremendous amount of trust, there's that old joke about trust but verify. So we do measure a lot of things on the company. We're not measuring how many hours people are on or how many Slack messages, stuff like that. Everyone is held accountable to objectives. So a marketing team is held accountable to, are you achieving, a certain number of leads or not? And candidly, I don't care whether they achieve it in 1 hour of work or 800 hours of work. It's how they achieve the goals that create value for the company. And if they can do that in 1 hour of work and spend the rest of the time on the beach, that's great. Like it's a win-win situation. The third element is trust but verify or trust but measure.
I like that. That's powerful. And you've worn many hats in your career. So from finance, like tech, different traditional industries. How has juggling all these roles shaped your approach to leadership? Because I think having all that different exposure really helps have a different perspective as well. But how has it shaped your approach, especially to leadership?
Sure. I'll say 2 things, right? There's many different sort of leaders. Some leaders lead based on their vision for how they want to change the world. Some lead based on their personal charisma. Some leaders lead based on like a specific passion they have in life. And all of those sorts of leaders can be effective. I think in observing or in my career experiences, I've discovered two things about myself, about the type of leader I am, as well as how I can be effective as a leader. Number one, I'm very much about first principles. I was trained as a mathematician. I really like understanding how, machine works or company works. And I try and understand that very deeply and then try and make sure as much as possible, everyone around the company understands what these first principles are. So at Ideascale, for example, right after I joined, I laid out to literally every single employee, this is what a software company is. Here's how it makes money. Here's the three numbers that matter. And we're going to measure those three numbers. And here's how you and your department contribute to one or all of these three numbers every day, right? So they know that they need to be contributing in some way to one of these three numbers, because if those three numbers go up, we all do better as a company. The second is I try and be very, very transparent about the decision-making process and make it a meritocratic decision-making process rather than a politics or seniority decision-making process. So in a lot of organizations, when someone, basically the senior most or the loudest voice is the decision maker. At Ideascale, we have intentionally created a culture, or I've intentionally created a culture where best ideas win, not most senior ideas. So for example, our platform ranks people's ideas in a company. And it's really funny and heartwarming actually for me. So when I submit an idea, to see that idea, sometimes we downvote it. And it's really funny to see a CEO's ideas have like -5 votes, which means people hated it. And they didn't hate it because they don't like me. It's like it's a bad idea. And conversely, a junior person's idea rising up, and that's the one that gets done. And people have a lot of faith here at Ideascale that good ideas will get done because we're operating from a first principle of we're going to do what's right for the company and for the organization, not what strokes some person's ego or based on someone's title.
I like it. And speaking of ideas, you've worked with companies like NASA. Have you seen any wild ideas come through your platform that has blown your mind?
I have to be careful because I'm not allowed to look at our customers' data, right? So I can refer to two public campaigns I'm aware of. This was a public campaign. I won't name the customer, but this was a major fast food chain. They needed new menu ideas. So this is a global fast food chain. You've probably dined there at some point in your life. They needed new menu ideas. So they reached out to their millions of prospective customers around the world and said, hey, give us new ideas for what our new burger should be or our new ribs menu item or whatever it was, right? And they got thousands of ideas, some of which were terrible, right? Some of which were probably unsafe to make. But they also got hundreds of ideas that were like kind of cool. Some were wacky, right? I think there was a candy burger involved at some point, which seemed kind of gross to me. But I don't think the company went with that one. But I think there were one or two ideas that they did go and made them seasonal items that we've all probably again tried at some point. The second more funny use case was actually something we used internally. I was in Japan a few months ago, or I guess back in spring now, for a customer conference there with our Japanese team. Every company in Japan, every small government agency in Japan has a really cute mascot. And I thought about it and said like, hey, Ideascale should have a mascot. So we actually ran a campaign internally, and any employee, any customer, anyone, you could have come and suggested ideas for what Ideascale's new mascot should be. And so we came up with a really cool mascot submitted by one of our employees in South Africa. It was the winning submission. And it's like a cute little dog with a superhero costume and carrying a light bulb. So that's like a kind of really wacky, fun use case that you can use a very serious, powerful piece of software, but you can use it for more fun things, not just what's the next experiment we run at NASA for.
Wow. Have you dug into any data that revealed something unexpected that was a game changer as well, besides the mascot thing, but a game changer for your business by digging into the data?
We generally don't dig into our customers' data because it's their ideas and sometimes it's very, very proprietary. So we certainly don't go into our customers' data without their permission, unless it's like a public,
What about your business though?
Public use of software. I'd say
So your own.
in general, look, our software is good at both coming up with small incremental improvements as well as game-changing improvements. Without being specific, I can say, yes, some of our customers have launched game-changing things through their use of software like ours. Or alternatively, a lot of them also have done a lot of small things that aren't groundbreaking, but incremental improvements every day do compound pretty dramatically over time.
Let's talk about the future trends in your vision. If you had to start a brand new company tomorrow, what industry would you dive into and why?
That's a tough question. I would say fashion, something in apparel or fashion. And the reason is, I think a lot of fashion companies have evolved into kind of rapidly churning out a high quantity of stuff, and they are every season they have to innovate constantly for new clothing, unless undershirts and underwear might be the only two industries that don't have to evolve every year. And that's a really, really tough dynamic as a business because you constantly have to come up with new fashion. And then when your customers throw that fashion away 6 months later, you have to come up with new designs. And that's really bad for the environment. It's really expensive from a production point of view. And it's really the customer's getting a low cost thing because the company's only designing something to last 3 or 6 months. So I think there's a lot of room for business model and technological improvement in the fashion industry that reduces some of the wastefulness, increase the profitability, and gives the customer a much higher quality product. And I think that requires a fundamentally different approach to running the business that most people aren't trying right now, creating an opportunity for potential entrepreneurs.
Wow, that's interesting. I never thought of that different point of view, fashion. Now, with AI and automation on the rise, do you think the role of the CEO is going to look completely different 10 years from now?
I don't think the role of the CEO will change. I have always viewed three things as the job of a CEO. Number one, to hire the right people. Number two, to set a long term strategy. And number three, to create the right incentives within an organization. Actually, and then there's a fourth one, to be the ultimate person who's held accountable for better or worse at the successes and failures of the organization. At some point, someone needs to get the credit or be blamed when things go wrong, right? Those elements are unlikely to change because of AI, right? But the standards for what is acceptable performance are going to dramatically improve. As I said, like if AI is able to outperform 98% of people, including extremely intelligent or competent professionals, then the excuse for I'm a CEO, but I didn't know how to run marketing is no longer there. Or like you can't be a CEO and say like I lacked this skill set, because then your boss or your board can literally say, hey, but why couldn't you have spent 5 seconds using ChatGPT or Gemini to figure this out? Because ChatGPT and Gemini absolutely can. In fact, that's already the question I ask, a lot of my colleagues and people who report to me is like, hey, why are you asking me how to do this? Or why can't you do this when I know you can go to ChatGPT and figure this out in 5 seconds? Are you right? So the
Yeah.
bar for what is acceptable performance is increasing throughout. I don't know if it's cascaded quite to the CEO level yet, but it definitely will over the next generation of CEOs. The bar for what is acceptable is rising dramatically every day. And that's cascading upwards throughout the seniority of an organization where CEOs will be held to a much higher standard than they were ever before.
Yeah, that's true. And is it true that you're teaching yourself Python, which is pretty
Yeah, so
impressive for
look,
a
one of the
CEO?
things I've always believed in my career, and this is probably good advice I think to everyone, is no matter where you are in your career, you need to invest in continuous formal learning. So for me, that means I have a lot of fancy degrees and I'm already a CEO somewhere, but the learning doesn't stop there, right? It didn't stop at college, it didn't stop at business school, it doesn't stop because I have the title. So I'll give a few examples. In the past month and a half alone, I've taken 3 courses on prompt engineering for ChatGPT from Coursera. I've completed a course on English literature that was more for fun. And I'm doing 2 computer science courses, one on algorithms and one on database management as well. So I'm basically by the end of next year, just to give an example, by the end of probably 2025, I will have completed enough courses to have got or basically earned another full bachelor's degree. I don't think I'll pay the fees to get a full degree, but that's the amount I'm investing in learning. And part of that is because I enjoy learning, but part of that is it's absolutely essential to keep upgrading your skills, not maintaining your skills, but upgrading your skills. Because if I didn't take that prompt engineering course, I know there's someone out there, one of my competitors, someone who wants my job who has, and I will be outdated in 2 years if I'm not a master in ChatGPT, right? And that is true for almost every professional. It frightens me if someone's not mastering these tools because like it's an interview question I ask every time now. Can you use this? And if you can't, you may not have a job tomorrow, much less a year from now.
Yeah, that's pretty powerful. And there's a couple of questions that I wanted to pick off that, but how do you find the time to do all of that and balance as well? Because, wait, I'm going to ask you another question of what made you be so hungry to learn. Because me, myself, I love learning. This is why I do my podcast. I love being the dumbest one in the room and just picking your brain. All these successful CEOs and entrepreneurs, I love learning because it helps me grow as well. But geez, I wouldn't have all the time to do all the courses that you've done. How do you find the time without feeling overwhelmed and burning out?
So there's a boss of mine from when I was at the shoe company that said, when someone says they're too busy, they really mean they're prioritizing other things in their life. And I thought that was a really very witty and insightful comment. So you have to make time for the things that matter to you in life. And you make choices every day about, hey, am I allocating time to busy work at work? Am I doing something strategic? Am I spending time with my family, on my fitness, on my health, on education, on TV, sports, right? You have to make those tough decisions in life. So For example, this past Saturday, I sat there for 8 or 9 hours taking a algorithms course. I made a choice, right? That, hey, that was a Saturday that I'm not going to spend with my wife because I'm going to study, right? That was so I made time and forced myself, and that required sacrifices. But remember, I enjoy it, but B, more importantly, and probably more relevant to most of your audience members is it's not really a choice, because if I'm not investing today, I know that there's 7 billion people in the world that I'm competing against, and someone is making that choice and sacrifice. And they may not catch up to me tomorrow, but they may catch up to me in a year, 5 years, 10 years from now. And then have I done right by myself, my company, and my family if I, fell behind the curve? And the answer is no. Everyone's busy, right? Everyone has things they'd like to do. You have to make sacrifices and choices and priorities in life. Sometimes those priorities are difficult, but you have to very much maintain the long-term perspective. And for me, it's not a choice. If I don't build these skills, I'm very acutely aware that someone else out there is, and they are hungry and are coming for my lunch and my company's lunch.
That's powerful. Now, I'm fascinated to know too, because you've got the hunger to learn so much and to succeed and be a great leader. And you've grown up in India, now leading a global company. Has that influenced the way your personality is and your leadership style and the hunger there? Is that a contributing factor? Just the background, because I know that our upbringing determines who we are as well. But can you share a little bit about that? And is that what makes you have that drive?
Not a hunger. I would say, like, being an immigrant, I don't think makes me hungry. It does give me a sense of responsibility. My parents sacrificed a lot when they immigrated from India to Canada in the 1980s. And that's for anybody who's gone through an immigrant experience, seeing what your parents went through, the classic, $5 in your pocket and the shirts on your back, the sacrifices they made, gives you a sense of responsibility that you shouldn't waste the opportunities that are afforded to you, or at least I can't speak for others, but I'm very cognizant of the fact every day that opportunities have been granted to me through the sacrifice of multiple generations of my family. My grandmother worked very hard to give my mother her opportunity. My mother then emigrated across the world to give me an opportunity. So that, weight of responsibility, or at the very least cognizance, affects me. In terms of my leadership style, I'd say it doesn't affect my drive, but having lived in multiple countries teaches you a greater appreciation for the differences in communication and cultures of different places. So, somebody who's only grown up in America may not appreciate the different cultural and value systems that apply, in Confucian cultures, or in the Middle East, right? Or France, right? Like, why do the French do business differently than Americans? That may seem very strange to an American, but for someone who's lived in a couple of different cultures or countries, it's like, okay, I may not know specifically how the French do business, but I have an appreciation that there are different ways of doing business in Japan and China and India. So therefore, the French, you have to respect, when you're doing with the French, their cultural beliefs and their ways of doing business, which may be distinct. Actually, even Canadians, I've lived in both Canada and the United States for long periods of time. The Canadian style of business is surprisingly a little bit different than doing business with an American, which you wouldn't suspect given, same TV shows and same channels, same language. So that cultural awareness of differences and respecting those differences, I think, does stem from having actually lived embedded in a variety of different cultures over my life.
That's very interesting. And do you have a certain routine, daily habits or rituals that you can't live without?
I don't know if I can't live without it. Everything's a choice in life. I try and have it all in life, right? I get up every morning around 6, go work out. I try and eat healthy, as much home cooked meals as I can, because that's much healthier than eating out. I try and read every day. I try and do like half an hour podcasts during walks or runs, so I'm learning something during my podcast. I try and go to bed reasonably early, like around 9 or 10 most nights if possible. So none of that is stuff that I can't live without, but it is a reasonably full schedule over the course of every day. I spend time with my wife. I'm about to have my first kid pretty soon, so I have to, going back to how do I make time for these things, some things will have to give, because I'm hopefully going to spend a lot, not hopefully, I'm definitely going to choose to prioritize my child over other aspects of my life. So other things will give as I make room for that aspect of my life.
That's exciting. Yes, a lot of things will definitely change. In terms of your success, who's been your biggest inspiration? Someone that you've looked up to? Have there been books or someone that's made a huge impact?
Sure. So my high school calculus teacher was this gentleman named Mr. Kennedy. It was my first real math course that I'd ever taken, like serious math course that headed me towards being a math major. What I really valued about what he taught me was two things. Number one, he'd always kind of criticize me in a gentle way if like when I did things wrong. So I may have gotten 98% on an exam, but he pointed out that the 2% is missing and that's worthy to improve. So never rest on your laurels. That's number one. And number two, it's really funny you learned this in a math class, but the importance of presentation. So if my handwriting was terrible, he would comment on it, which you'd never assume in a math class. They were totally irrelevant. And it at one point made me ashamed in a kind of motivational way. I should say he was a very, very excellent teacher, but taught me like, look, I should probably invest in these other aspects of my life that I think are inconsequential. And writing is a small one, but it really taught me you can't just be good at one thing in life. You have to actually think about the other aspects of your life that you may think are unimportant, but someone out there thinks it will be important, right? It taught me to respect that the way I see the world or the way I prioritize the world may not universally reflect how others prioritize the world or aspects of their life.
Yeah, that's pretty powerful. And if you had to go back to your younger version of yourself, what three key pieces of advice would you give to yourself?
Number one, I would advise them to do continuous learning earlier than I. There was like a 10-year gap where I wasn't investing as much as I am nowadays. I wish I had not skipped 10 years because I basically missed a lot of cool learning opportunities there. So number one, invest in continuous learning aggressively. Number two, I would have encouraged my younger self to join more clubs. So, I've been working out my entire life, but always in like a gym by myself. I would have, encouraged my younger self to go join like a running club or a CrossFit or a spinning clubs, are they called, where you ride the bike really fast. And number three is read more. There was this long period of life between probably age 18 through probably age like 30 where I just stopped reading. I mean, I would read, newspapers and articles on the web, but not reading books. And I think as I've started to read more books over the last 5 or so years, I've realized like there's really cool stories that are written in, such a unique way from some exceptional person somewhere in the world that are worth reading. And they make me just happier as a human being.
Which books have been your favorite?
So right now I'm halfway through Paradise Lost by Milton. I don't know if you've ever read it. It's considered one of the most famous books in the English language. And what's really cool is I'm not a religious person, but when you're reading it, I'm getting the feeling like God was speaking to this guy. The story of how he wrote this book is really funny. I don't know if you've heard it, but he lost his vision at some point and he started having dreams at night. And he'd wake up in the morning and like he'd dictate to one of his two daughters, I think, and they would write the words for him. So the story is like God was literally speaking to him in his dreams and his daughters were transcribing this because he was totally blind and unable to write. And when I'm reading this book, as a non-religious person, I can feel that this was some tremendous work of human art or something inspired by something bigger than ourselves.
Wow, I'm going to definitely look into that book. How would you personally define success?
It's in two ways. Number one, that my parents are proud of me, that I have done well by them and by society. Number two, that over the course of my life, I've created value for everyone around me, whether that be my employees, my shareholders, my customers, my family. I want to leave having created some amount of value. It may not have to be a lot, but for everyone around me and everyone that I've touched.
Wow. Yeah, well, that's beautiful. Is there a key message you want to leave with our audience, our entrepreneur? Any advice or tips, especially since you've been in the startup world and successful?
I'd say two things. One thing about a startup and one thing about continuing education. On the startup world, a lot of people start companies because they have a cool idea, but they haven't thought through whether others will value that idea. So spend some time thinking about, hey, your idea sounds great to you. Does it actually sound good to other people? Is it an actual business? Because that's something I think a lot of people do incorrectly, because what's cool to you may not be cool to me and the other 7 billion people on this planet. And then secondly, going back to my point about continuous learning, I really want to emphasize to everyone that it is, no matter how many degrees you have, whether you finished college or not, or you're still in high school or you finished PhDs, if you're not continuously learning, you're falling behind. And that is really terrifying in the age of AI.
Powerful. Yes, I totally agree with you. Guys, if you found this very valuable, please do me a favor, hit the like, hit the subscribe, and let me know what you think about it. And also, if you're listening on the podcast, please hit the follow button. It does help the channel grow. If people want to find you, Nick, where can they find and connect with you?
Perfect. You can either go to ideascale.com, which is our company. You can email me at nick.jain@ideascale.com or find me on LinkedIn and message me there. I respond to 100% of messages.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you so much for your time. It's been great.
Thank you so much for having me again, Linda.